Well, thank you everybody for coming. It's been really fun to work in this community. I want to thank, as usual, now all of a sudden my remote isn't working. Why is it that that happens? There we go. So I want to thank the city and I want to thank Metro for sponsoring this work. It's been wonderful to have their support. And I want to thank all of you for coming because your involvement is really what makes this program happen and work. The people who were here last time are going to be able to know what they're in for in terms of I probably covered twice the information I should in the period of time allotted to me. So I'm going to dive right in. What we're going to do today is I'm going to give you a brief review of what we went over last time, and then I'm going to spend the bulk of the time talking about Lake Oswego specifically. So what did we talk about last time? Last time, for some reason, my remote is very sticky. So last time we talked about centers and why they're important. I want to talk about that a little bit more. This is obviously Chicago, which is a different scale than downtown. But I do want to talk about centers because I think this is a really important concept. Post-World War II, the baby boom generation reshaped America's cities. And they took the focus away from in-city and they moved it towards the suburbs. Now, I happen to believe that we are in a demographic shift where we're going to see as big a change coming up over the next 3 or 4 decades as we saw, but it's going to be moving away from the suburbs and back towards the cities. And I want to talk about why I think that, if I can get my remote to work. I'm going to go through just a couple of reasons why I think that, and reasons I just want you guys to think about why a walkable center is really, really important to the future and the health of your community. This was an article in the Las Vegas paper. It's about Generation Y, which is larger than the post-war baby boom. And they were very concerned about the fact that they have a bunch of infrastructure that does not appeal to Generation Y at all. 80 million strong. They want walkable places. 80% of them want to live in walkable places. The next, I may have to move this and do it by hand. The next, let's see. The next one is that the internet is really reshaping how young people think about how they live and transportation, this idea of how they get around, how they socialize, how they work. Was it 46% of young people would rather have access to the internet than access to a car, whereas for baby boomers that was only 15%. That's a big shift in how people think. Young people aren't driving in record numbers. Getting your driver's license at 16, that's what you did on your birthday. I mean, that's what I did on my birthday. That was a rite of passage. It is no longer a rite of passage. Record numbers of young people are not driving any longer. Suburban economics are shifting. So this information was in a New York Times article, but it was taken from a Brookings Institute report that shows some of the economic shifts that are going on between cities and suburbs. And it's going in an opposite direction than what it has been since World War II. So for the first time, more of America's metropolitan poor live in the suburbs than live in the cities. And that's a very new economic shift. The last reason that I think centers are important is that we just don't have any money to maintain what we have, much less build and widen new roads. I was last year at a national summit of mayors, and Republican, Democrat, small city, big city, the primary concern of every single mayor was that they didn't have enough money to even do basic road maintenance. Forget about doing anything new and exciting. So I think we're really going to be entering an era of utilizing what we have. So those are all the reasons that I think centers are important. The next thing that we covered was the basic stages that describe economic growth in a mixed-use district. So there are 3 types of mixed-use districts. The first one I call an emerging district, and it's characterized by having buildings that have not been redeveloped. They had a lot of blanks. They have inward-facing uses. Typically, this district lacks continuity, and it generally doesn't have an identity that's known outside of the immediate neighborhood, if it has one at all. So those are all pictures of an emerging district. Just a little over half a mile away would be a transition district. Transition districts are characterized by a place where most of the existing building stock has been redeveloped. There's a fair amount of what I call street level dialogue. Foot traffic is going up. There is A stronger sense of identity. They're starting to hold successful events, and they have really functioning organizations. The last type of district that we talked about is a mature district. Mature districts are foot traffic. They have high foot traffic counts. They don't have a lot of blanks. They have great connectivity. I'm gonna have to make sure that these keep going. They have a high level of retail sophistication. They tend to have a fair amount of density, residentially, commercially, or both. And they have very active uses on the ground floor. So that would be a mature district. So that's a quick kind of overview of what we talked about with types of districts. The other thing we talked about is the characteristics of successful mixed-use places. Downtowns are not like arterials. Arterials are automobile-centered, and you don't have the land. You just don't have the square footage to compete with these environments. And so if you try, you usually end up being kind of an in-between place that's not quite a downtown, it's not quite a mall, and it's always unsuccessful and economically underperforming. So economically functioning downtowns have certain characteristics. They tend to be very attractive pedestrian environments. They have very active storefronts and redeveloped buildings. They have a lot of connectivity. There's not a lot of blanks. Connectivity is where revenue generation comes from. That's where you make money, is people walking the streets. So successful foot traffic districts, as we talked about before, can rival or surpass automobile-centered districts, but you have to get enough people walking on the street. The other thing that we talked about was the types of businesses that tend to take a district from being emerging and transition to being a mature district. Who are these people that help to revitalize First 23rd or Mississippi Avenue or Hawthorne? Well, they're mostly destination businesses, and these are businesses that are people go to usually as a part of a planned trip, so they can stay alive in a district that is underperforming. So they tend to be kind of the backbone of a district that revitalizes, and restaurants are the most important component of those, because people will travel quite a long ways to go to a restaurant. They won't travel a long ways to impulse buy a candle necessarily, for example. So I also like to think about, okay, if those are the kinds of businesses that are successful, who starts them? They tend to be local people who live in the community. They tend to be between about 20 and 50, and they're often opening their first business. And what do those people care about? Two things. They care about price, and they care about character. So they kind of want to fall in love with a space. A national credit tenant, all they care about is what other like businesses are doing in terms of sales per square foot in that district. But local people, they don't care about that. They have an amount on their business plan that they can afford for rent, and they want to fall in love with the space, and that's really kind of it. So those are the two things that they care about, and this is why districts usually revitalize around existing building stock, because you kind of have instant character, and you can renovate them cheaply, and you can offer them for a rent that's affordable for somebody to take a chance on starting a new business out and meet that number that they have on their business plan. So that's it. We spent an hour talking about that last time, and we've covered it in something like 5 minutes. So I'm going to spend the rest of the time talking about Lake Oswego. And I like to start by listing your strengths. I don't like to work or think about it in terms of always solving problems. I like to first think about what are all the great things that are going on in the community. And you guys have the buildings, the grid structure, the economic base, everything you need is here to make downtown really thrive. So let's go over some of the fabulous things that you have. You have some wonderful buildings, truly wonderful buildings. You have a gorgeous neighborhood that surrounds your downtown. I am not a personal GIS unit, but if I had to guess, I would say you have more residential density immediately surrounding your downtown than most other regional suburban town centers in the greater metro region. You have, supported a fabulous new construction mixed-use project. You have a tremendous art collection. I log a lot of miles in the districts that I work in, and it was so much fun to walk around and discover all these little pieces of art that I had no idea were there from all the time that I had driven here. You have some top-notch streetscape work. You have an income demographic that everybody in the region is very envious of when it comes to potentially trying to attract tenants. You have a lake. That's really cool. You have a mature tree canopy. People like to walk where there are mature trees. So that sounds kind of silly, but it's actually really important. You have 3 grocery stores. Downtown Portland doesn't have 3 grocery stores. I think this is incredible. A lot of the downtowns I work with are just begging for a grocery store. You guys have grocery stores coming out of your ears. You have a library. And this is probably a no-no to talk about, but you have the potential for the streetcar. And I know it's suffered a setback, but these things happen in waves. And I just want to touch, again, I think the suburban communities that are going to thrive over the next 3 decades are going to be those that are walkable and those that are interconnected to the region as a whole. So having the potential for this is potentially, I think, good for the city in the long term. So that's an impressive list. That's a very impressive list. Downtown just has a ton going for it. So what I want to talk about from here is the ways that you can leverage these strengths more effectively than you are now, because there's some definite areas where you're not leveraging everything that you have going for you. So when I start working in a community, I walk a lot. And I walk a lot because that's the experience that drives sales per square foot, is creating an environment that people want to walk in. So you'll see from all the pictures that I have up here, I have been here all times of the day and week and over seasons even. You're going to see kind of a summer through winter perspective of your downtown. And after I start doing that, I asked the city that I'm working with, so I called up Jane and I said, I want a downtown map and I want a grid and I want building footprints. Can you send it over? And she was very lovely and sent that right over. And this is the map that I started with. And the first thing I like to do is I like to just look at the map and see, does anything jump out at me? And so just, initially looking at this map, I would say this is probably the commercial area. Why do I think that? Yes, parking lots, parking lots, parking lots, parking lots. Then I look around and I say, oh my goodness, this is really amazing, because this is the scale that's very typical for housing. And from looking in here, it looks like there's a mix of some multifamily or some row houses as well as single family houses. That's great. I'm excited about that. And then the other thing I'm really excited about is this grid. And I know that makes me completely geeky to get excited about a grid, but you guys have a fabulous, fabulous grid. So those are things that when I looked at the map off the top of my head, I was pretty excited about. So the next thing I do is I like to color in my map. I'm a frustrated 3rd grader. So this is sort of my homemade GIS map, and it may not be perfect. It's just to do trends. So please don't come up to me later and say, I think that one space wasn't vacant. So what I do, the reason I do this map, I call it the ground floor activation map. What I do is I go through and I color every building that is in the area that I care about, which is sort of the commercial part of it, but I also bleed into the residential part. And I want to be looking at just what's going on in the ground floor. So red is an inactive use on the ground floor, blue is an active use on the ground floor, and green is vacant. I look at the ground floor, again, because districts take their identity from the ground floor. And I think that there's a tendency sometimes when we're looking at downtowns and trying to figure them out, you look at so many different things going on. So we're going to spend a lot of time today just talking about the ground floor. Now I'm going to pass these maps around because it's a little hard to see on this screen. So I want you guys, you may have to share. I'm not quite sure if there's enough, but if you can share with a neighbor, that would be great. And this has a couple phases of the map, so I want you to ignore the black bars on the map, but it might be a little easier to follow on there. So let me explain to you, there's some judgment call in here in terms of what's active and inactive. Almost anything, any business could be labeled as blue or red. So to give you some examples, I talked about this being Umpqua Bank, right? So they have taken all that sort of wasted space and they've turned their ground floor space into a community living room with internet access. So this bank is blue, it's active. This bank, which is in another city, is kind of like a vault that's been dropped down into the corner of this intersection, and I would not call this an active use. This would be red. This is a neighborhood bar. I would say, okay, this is pretty active. We'll give them a blue. This is a neighborhood bar, and this gets a red, because that's not very active. You have a good example of that here. This is a gas station. Typically gas stations I label as red because they're not things that pedestrians interact with. But you have quite possibly the cutest gas station I've ever seen in my life. I love this gas station, and so this gas station, this gets a blue. So I go to all of this trouble, and I want you to ignore the black bars on here in a little bit. I'm going to explain that. But again, I go to this trouble because the ground floor is what we care about. So nobody says, hey, I'm hungry and I'm a little bit bored. Let's go hang out in that district where there's a lot of lawyers' offices and doctors' offices, and maybe we can grab some lunch, right? So what's happening on the ground floor is pretty darn important. So when I look at the ground floor activation map, there's a couple things that I notice. So I immediately notice you have these kind of big buildings with parking lots that are larger than the building. Even Lakeview Village, which you have the cutest gas station in the world and what may be the best looking parking garage ever. It's really incredible. I did an amazing job on it. But if you look at the square footage, and this isn't exactly to scale, but it's rough, you still have a lot of square footage that's devoted to cars there instead of people. So that's something that's interesting. So one of the big things that I took from this and from walking around is I really think of you guys as having 3 nodes. I really think that this stuff north of A, I call it sort of a traditional town center node. You have a lot of great older buildings in this part of your downtown, and it's part of the original grid. This I call sort of the Lakeview Village node. I would definitely note that probably the strongest amount of activity is happening here, and then there's sort of a dead zone to get over to this. So this is a great run of buildings here, but right now it's kind of an outpost. The other thing that's interesting is this commercial district is pretty small. I mean, it's about 6 blocks. It's not really large. And then you have another node here, and I do not want to discount this. This actually has some really great infrastructure and could become a part of downtown. So I really want to be thinking of what I call the Lakeside node. I know it has a name for down there, but I didn't remember it off the top of my head, so I named it myself. So that's really what jumps out at me and what I'm going to be talking about today. So you'll hear me kind of reference that, and I just wanted everybody to be aware of what I'm talking about since I self-named everything. So what I want to focus on is strengthening nodes and then improving connectivity between the nodes. And I like to talk about it in this order because this is how it actually happens in real life. So if you take a really long street, say in Portland, like the Hawthorne district. I mean, the Hawthorne district was really 3 blocks from 35th to 38th for a long time. And so different nodes have sprung up on the other side of 39th and here and there, and the nodes strengthen, and then over time they start interconnecting. So that's how districts improve. So we're going to discuss how you strengthen your nodes first. I want to use a store analogy to do that because I think downtowns are a lot like stores. You're going to get tired of me using this analogy because I'm going to use it a lot. Downtowns function like a single store. So to make Lake Oswego vibrant and successful, you're going to have to do the same things as if you wanted to start a vibrant store. You have to think about your front door. You have to think about what your storefront looks like. You have to think about where people come from, how you get their attention, how you entice them to come in. Once they're in your store, what are your best-selling products? How do you use those? How do you move people around? How do you keep them in your store? Is there something engaging throughout your store? All of these things apply to downtowns just as they apply to stores. So we're going to be looking at your downtown from that perspective. Front doors, aisles, shelves, and products. So we're going to start with front doors. And I say doors plural because I really think that you have 2. You have A Street and you have State Street. I'm going to start with A. In terms of physical environment, I actually use this picture all the time when I present in other communities as a great example of boulevarding on a arterial because I have never seen a really cute building with a wine shop in it right across the street from a tire store ever on an arterial. This is the only one I've ever seen. So I use this as an example all the time. So you've done a good job in making A Street pleasant to walk along. I think there are some areas for improvement. One of them has to do with crossing. So you know, the message that you're sending that I have to press a button to cross A Street everywhere is that cars are more important than pedestrians. And it's really frustrating because I feel like I'm in this downtown environment when I'm on A, and then I go to kind of cross the street, and I'm not just waiting for the light to change. I have to press this button, and there's this whole procedure. And this crossing is really funny. I had people, every time I was here, I had people tell me to be careful when I was crossing. And one time there was this poor man who was taking his groceries from Safeway, and he had pressed the button and the lights were going and all the cars had stopped, and he got about a quarter of the way through and he felt so uncomfortable he sprinted the rest of the way across the street. That is a sign that it's still not as pedestrian friendly as we would like, and this is important because your best-selling product is to the south of A Street. That's Lakeview Village. And if you're going to use that, you want people to travel from south of A Street to north of A Street to partake in the rest of your downtown. And right now, it's not very comfortable to do that. So that's something that I would definitely think about. And the other thing that I would think is, and you can see it on your maps, you have a lot of inactive uses along A Street. So while it's an attractive environment if you have to walk down the street, there's not necessarily a lot on the street that pulls you along. There are some great stores, but there's also a lot that's inactive along that street. So my second recommendation would be to get more active uses over time. So that's one front door, and it's in pretty good shape. This is your other front door, and I want to tell you that I took my life in my hands to take this photo here on this really narrow sidewalk in the rain with bad visibility, and it was pouring. And I actually went to the Albertsons and I bought like the brightest pink umbrella that I could find so that nobody would run me down, because I was crossing, 43 and standing on this really narrow thing, and people were just flying by. So A Street, it's kind of funny, or State Street, this is a really important front door. It runs along the entire edge of your downtown. You can't ignore this street and pretend like it's not there and doesn't have an impact on your downtown. And it's kind of funny because, in the suburbs, everyone talks about traffic counts as the great retail indicator. So when you work on projects, they'll be like, oh, this intersection has this traffic count. For downtowns, a traffic count is the number of people who are driving past your downtown. These are not people who are engaging in your downtown. So there are several things you can be doing. This is not a front door that you need to totally abandon. There's some long-term and some short-term things. Long-term, I think you guys should really think about reclaiming 43 from ODOT. There are cities all over the country that are reclaiming arterials and state highways from their state transportation agencies because they care about wide lanes for freight and moving traffic through and past your downtown. They don't really factor in livability. And so cities are taking back their state highways so they can use these really important spines for a variety of reasons, not just moving people through really, really quickly. So if I was to reclaim this from ODOT, I would reintroduce on-street parking. I would do some boulevard treatment, some narrower lanes, and better and more frequent crossings. This is particularly important in the Lakeside node. You have this fabulous theater and this great run of buildings there that you're seeing, and all the parking that hopefully someday you can legally share would be across the street. There's not a lot of places or any articulation for crossing the street there except for that one light. So I think that long term, if you want to start incorporating this part of State Street that you see in the picture into this idea of downtown, you need to make it a little easier to cross the street. The next thing that I want to talk about is not giving up on this run up. As you're talking about north of A Street on State, don't give up on this as an entry. There's actually great buildings and a lot of opportunities here to tell a really great story about, hey, you're by a downtown. So I want to talk a little bit about those things. One of them is color. So it looks like you're introducing people to come into beige land. This is a great building, and if it had just some color, it would tell a totally different story to people driving by. It has a great collection of businesses in it. This is Miller Paint. Drives me nuts because they have the divine, paint colors, the greatest, paint colors, and they do nothing with it to make this building look more attractive, and it could look great. You also have kind of retaining walls. The other thing I want you to notice is the backs of all the buildings that you can see up here into downtown. This is actually an opportunity to tell people about what's in downtown from 43 in terms of how those buildings look from the back, and again, using color and you know, maybe art, I don't know, something to get people's attention. But right now it just looks like the back of stuff, and it doesn't really entice you in any way to go up there. So this building, you know, could obviously have a totally different impact if it had color. And then there's the stretch from A to B on State Street. And this is one of your best collections of buildings that you have in your downtown. I know nobody thinks that, but it is truly one of your best collections of buildings in your downtown. And it's funny because I have a gentleman in Tigard owns a printing company who actually lives in Lake Oswego, and he did a contest, he did a calendar for all his clients, and he put up neighborhood photos, and he used some of mine and some of an architect friend of mine. And they have to guess where the neighborhood is, and this is one of the stumper photos. Nobody can figure out that this is in Lake Oswego, which I thought was kind of funny. So I really, on State Street, want you to focus on this area between A and B. So cutest gas station in the world. I never noticed it until I walked by it. I actually never noticed it when I was driving. The poor guys who work here, because they were just sitting in there, and I came in with my camera and my clipboard, and I was asking them all these questions, and they thought I was a little crazy, but I was so excited. And that you know, building needs contrast, because that's what people are going to notice when they drive by. So it just needs some color. It's great brickwork, something that is going to give it a little bit of contrast so people notice it as they go by. This building, again, it's a great building. You don't notice it at all. You could paint it, remove the awning, and install some sconce lighting, and it could look like this. I know you look at that building and think, no way, Michelle, that could never happen. Well, this is how that building looked to begin with. Right? So that is not so different from that, okay? So you can't tell me that you can't do it, because I'm not going to believe you. It does. Yeah, so, and get rid of the moldy awning, right? So one of the things I always say, I have a lot of ways to make fun of awnings. One of them is that if you wrapped a beautiful woman in moldy clothing, she wouldn't look very beautiful anymore. And if you wrap a beautiful building in a moldy awning, it's not so appealing either. This is one of my favorite buildings in your downtown. This is a great building, and they do a great job of activating the sidewalk. It's wonderful. You do not notice this building when you drive by at all. It's so dark. It has amazing architectural details. Just color would make this building pop like this. This building used color to highlight the great arches and the architectural details in the building. Imagine what kind of impact that would have on the corner. The bike shop, it's a solid building. I call these awnings the Chicken Little awnings, right? Because they're these wood awnings that come out, and they're like, they feel like they're 2 inches above your head, and they're so heavy, and they're going to fall down on you, and it's so uncomfortable to walk under them. I hate these awnings. So on this building, you know, get rid of the awnings, put some dramatic lighting. You guys are missing out on so many opportunities to tell a cool story with your buildings, just with some nice lighting on the outside of your building, some sconces and some gooseneck lighting. Again, the clock shop, this is a fabulous store, and I just want to tell people as a gift idea, they have one of the most beautiful flasks I've ever seen in there, and I don't really drink, but I was so tempted to buy it because it's so gorgeous, but it's such a neat store, and it's exactly the kind of store that makes downtown special, because this is the sort of stuff that you don't find in a mall. So again, this just needs some paint and a little bit of lighting and would look really dramatic. And then we have the Rogers building, the George Rogers building. This is a landmark building. It's renowned for its octagonal, structure on the corner, which you can't notice from both directions because everything is beige. And one of the things I thought was interesting about this picture, and sometimes I see things in a different way when I go back and look through all my pictures even than when I experience in person. And one of the things that's kind of funny to me is even when I'm looking at this photo, this color beige, it just blends with the street. Like I have a hard time just bringing this building into focus because it's just so in the back. It looks like the sky and it all blends together. And this building should really make it pop. And it's got the Chicken Little awning all around the corner. And this building, I can't even tell you how important this building is. It's a landmark building. It's on the corner. So it's leading people, right? This is the building that should be taking people from your best-selling product, Lakeview Village, and making them, compelling them to cross the street, to cross A Street, and get them into the rest of your downtown. So you have to use these products appropriately to move people around. So, not everything has to be a bright color. This is a very tasteful color palette on a building, but they use 3 and 4 color paint jobs to highlight architectural details and to make it look good. And as if you notice, there's no awning. And then this is the last building that I'm going to talk about on this stretch. and I'm actually going to say that this is one of the most important buildings in downtown, if not the most important, because it bookends your downtown, and it's at the intersection of both of your front doors. So this building is really, really important, and I know a lot of people feel like it's a hopeless building, and I want to just say that I think there's this feeling in downtown, because Lakeview Village was so successful and they did such a great job, of kind of feeling like looking at all this existing infrastructure and saying, yeah, and so when we get rid of this, here's what we'll build there. And what I really want you to take from today is you have the building infrastructure right now to create an amazing downtown by executing on some really basic, simple things. And this building is one of those buildings. It's a great building, and it's constrained from being everything it needs to be in a couple of different ways, but one of them is color. This is a building that actually has a 300-foot face. And they broke it up with color, and they did some, some very small awnings to come out, lots of blade sign articulation. And if you think that that building can't look like this, this is what it looked like originally. So I challenge you to say that this is better, because it's not. So
I wish you could tell me why everybody in Oregon chooses to paint things gray. Oh, yeah.
It's... So we'll talk about that in more detail, actually, and how to tackle that. But it's a good question. So all of these, so in conclusion, I just want you guys all to think about, and I'm going to be highlighting where I think your best runs of infrastructure are. State Street is a huge missed opportunity for telling an exciting and vibrant story about your downtown, and really cheap and easy fixes, and the city has storefront money to help you make those fixes. You're crazy not to do it. Okay, so that was our front doors. We're going to move on, still continuing with the store analogy. I'm going to beat it to death until you don't ever want to hear it again. Aisles. We're going to move on to aisles. So in a store, that's how you get around a store. And that's the same in a city, but in a city, it's your roads and your sidewalks. As I talked about, your grid is fabulous. A lot of times I go to cities and their grid is sort of a nightmare and their streets look horrible. And so I don't have to talk to you guys about any of that stuff. I really, honestly, I swoon when I think about your grid. I pulled up, I pulled up this image, and here's your downtown. Okay, swooning still. And here's a bunch of surrounding development. Now, I put this picture up here because I wanted to show you that there's nothing else like this around you. There's nothing else like this. This is a special, unique place in Lake Oswego, and you can't take this development toolkit and apply it to this place, or it's not going to be successful because they're different. They're different environments. So I wanted to tell you that whenever you're thinking about what direction to go, you're making a land use decision, I want you to be inspired by it. I want you to think about creating space for people, not space for cars. So this is the Mall of America in Minnesota, and this is the same scale Venice. This is the exact same scale. Okay? So it's an extreme example, but I want you to be thinking about that because that's what you have in that grid. It's a special place. You guys need to treat it accordingly. I don't have a lot to say about your aisles. Just a couple of quick things. What is this? Right, but it's an alley, right? This is an alley to take you to a garage, and they've made it pretty darn compelling. So they put some windows up. You can't enter the stores from there, but you can see in the stores, and they put in a fountain, and they put in a little piece of art, and you want to walk down this thing, even though it goes to a parking garage. This is right across the street. You guys have a great collection of alleys all throughout your downtown and executing on some basic things, windows into stores, color, some treatments that make it exciting to pedestrians. All of a sudden, that makes it a really cool place to walk around. So that's, I think, a missed opportunity. The second revolves around creating some pedestrian entrances to some of your strong retail. This is actually a ton of retail and small stores in here, but there's not a lot that says, welcome, walker. And then the Country Square has a ton of great small shops, but you have to walk through the vehicle right-of-way to get in there. That does not appeal to walkers. So I just want you guys to think about this is a pathway from a sidewalk into a recessed building through a parking area, and it celebrates various forms of transportation, not just the car. This is also a walkway through a very large parking lot into a strip mall, and it's nice enough that they've taken and some parking spaces and actually created a nice outdoor seating area there as well. So finding some ways to bridge those gaps and create some pedestrian aisles, I think would be really nice. I'm moving on to shelves. So we've covered front doors and aisles. Shelves and products, what are those? Shelves are your buildings and your products are your businesses. So the buildings house the businesses. So we're going to talk about your shelving and then your products. I'm going to go back to this idea of beige again. So we're going to talk about your buildings. And these are your fixtures, your shelving. This is where you're displaying what's special, which are your ground floor uses. And one of the first things that I want you to notice as I go through these slides is that nearly every building in your downtown is some form of beige. There's white beige, and there's blue beige, and there's tan beige. It kind of feels, and look at the gray sky, it all just blends together into one. So you guys, it's like you've turned yourselves into the invisible city. And I did want to say, you know, that we do live in the Pacific Northwest, and this is one of my particular favorites. This is like you're celebrating beige. You're like, we're going to create 2 giant beige walls that are visible from Lakeview Village because we love beige so much. So we live in the Pacific Northwest, and it's dark and it's gray here a lot. So color is really, really important. And there's no cheaper or easier way to change people's perception about a place than to make it colorful and vibrant and engaging. And this isn't even every beige building. You know, there's still, I just got tired of putting them up, and I said, okay, I'm done. But I could really probably stand up here for the entire time allotted to me and show beige pictures. So my recommendation is not going to be surprising. I foreshadowed a little bit here. My recommendation is that 3 color paint jobs, at least on every building. And I want to show you the power of 3 color paint jobs. And I've already shown you a little bit, but they can help any building. So this is a building in Hillsborough. You know, you would think not a lot you could do here. That's pretty sad. They took out the tree, and all they did was paint it, and here's how it looks now. It's a big, big difference, just with paint, really dramatic. And so when you talk about the buildings that you have, which are fabulous, imagine the impact that they could have. So 3 color paint jobs are really important. They create vibrancy and interest and life. I want you to focus on some specific places. I'm going to go back to where you have the best collection of infrastructure. This is one of your best buildings, and your best infrastructure is where you have a mix of small businesses, where the building's built up to the sidewalk, and or both together. So I would love to see that be more colorful. This is one of the connectors between your best-selling product, Lakeview Village, and getting north of A Street. I'm trying to draw people north of A Street. Right across the street, some great businesses, again, completely beige. You totally lose them and don't know they're there. Those 2 buildings should pop out as separate buildings and be different and contribute to a more vibrant scene. This photo was taken when this building was a furniture store, and you couldn't tell it was a furniture store then, standing on the corner, violating one of the first rules of retail, so it's not a surprise they weren't successful. Now it's a dance studio. You still can't tell that if you're standing on the corner, but this building could do something to help entice people across the street and create more activity just with a little bit of color. It's an interesting building. The Country Square has a great collection of businesses and some really fabulous buildings. I love these buildings. And I want you to notice it's recessed and it has a grade change. So when you're a walker and you're kind of glancing around, you're trying to decide where to go, what do you see here? You see the roof. Yeah, that's what you see is the roof. And so you really need some color in here to draw people's attention to where there are faces that you can see. You know, this is really charming infrastructure. I would like to see a paint job that's a little more reminiscent of this house that was converted into a restaurant.
Question, I'm in that.
Uh-huh.
I'm in Jomano. office ever in Lake Oswego. Another building had the very first second floor room that was used as a city hall.
Right. So there's a lot of history there.
History in
Yeah.
that could really be played up
Yeah.
as an attraction.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, color in this project I think is really, really important. And this is another run of buildings. This is invisible. Can you see this? Is a driver going to ever notice this? Even walking across the street, you do not notice or see this building. This is a great building, and it has a great collection of little stores. As you go along here, this is so charming. And so it should have an impact, something like this, where people really notice it and see it and are engaged in this building. You want to draw attention to yourselves.
I have a question for you. So what would you recommend about all those trees that are?
Can we tackle that at the end? I'd like to talk about it, but otherwise I'll never get through this, and you guys will be here till 10. So a couple of the recommendations. You guys have design standards that require muted colors in your downtown. So it's like you're trying to depress people. Your design code says, let's depress Lake Oswego. So you need to get rid of that. You need to change that. The second recommendation is that design review should play no role in the selection of colors. So yes, that means you're going to get some bad paint jobs, but that also means you're going to get some incredible paint jobs. And right now, you don't have any incredible paint jobs in downtown Lake Oswego. And I want to say, I just want you to imagine a process where you said, I have a great idea for a mustard red, teal, taupe building. What do you think? That's not going to fly. That doesn't work. So you're not going to get very much interest. And I just want to say that in Portland, the Historic Landmarks Commission, as they put it, doesn't want to be the color police. They consider color to be a temporary finish to the building, and they are not interested in telling people what color to paint their building. So I really think that it shouldn't be a part of design review. And your design review process is particularly special in Lake Oswego because once something's in design review, it's in design review for life. So once a building, right? Once a building becomes beige, it is eternally beige. Like it's never leaving. So go back to this idea again of your shelves, which are your buildings. This is where you're presenting your products. I want to talk about awnings a little bit. I talked about them a little bit before, and these are all pictures of awnings that are doing nothing to contribute to your downtown environment. So common improper awning use is awnings that block building frontage, that stop you from experiencing the building that you're standing right next to. And I don't know why you would want to do it because this is an amazing building. And they also often will create dark recessed entries. So my recommendation is that you require in your code that every building have an awning. I think that's pretty onerous, both for new and existing buildings. I think it stops interesting and creative design for new buildings. And for existing buildings, an awning is a temporary accessory. And if somebody's not using it, they just let it fall apart because they don't care about maintaining it. So it just means requiring awnings is that you just end up with a lot of moldy, kind of crappy awnings around your downtown. So I would really recommend getting rid of your awning requirement. My general rule of thumb is you can have an awning if you are going to use it to bring your store or your restaurant or your business out to the sidewalk. And if you're not, then you really shouldn't have an awning because you're detracting from the street front environment. The other code change I would make related to awnings is that currently you can't have a blade sign in your downtown unless it's underneath an awning. So this is a great span of historic infrastructure in downtown Tacoma, and you couldn't have any of those blade signs without having an awning, which would totally ruin the look and the experience of standing next to these great buildings. So I'm not a huge fan of awnings unless you're going to aggressively use the space under them to provide a great experience. The last thing I want to talk about with shelves is very particular to downtown Lake Oswego. And I kind of didn't know how to put this because it's a really unique phenomenon. But I feel like you guys you have a lot of instances of You've found a lot of creative ways to keep people from your shelves. You've found a lot of ways to keep people away from your shelves, which are your buildings. And it's a little bit strange. So what is this store? It's the bike gallery, right? Good job. I just had to put this photo in because I thought it was really arty. You have a lot of examples of this. You do this with hardscape, you do it with landscape, and you do it with parking. Okay, so this is standing in a paper store in the country square. And does this make you want to walk around? No, it's pretty overwhelming that that's what you see when you walk out of a store. So you guys have come up with a lot of creative ways. I'm going to talk a lot about parking, but in a little bit. I'm going to focus on some of the other ones. So a lot of these examples are from 2nd. So I want to talk about this execution. I want to stand on the corner of 2nd and A. We've made A great street to walk on. And I have stood on 2nd for a lot of time. And I have not seen a single person who's walked by turn up 2nd. You have a great collection of businesses on 2nd. Why aren't they turning up? Well, if you stand on this corner, do you think that there's anything? Is there any retail store there for somebody to interact with? Do you see anything that tells you, as a visitor, as a shopper, that there's something here for you? So let's go across the street. No, you don't really. Okay, let's go up to B and look down. Okay, no. No, there's nothing that really tells me that there's a lot here for me to interact with. And that's why people aren't walking on these streets. So what can you do? What's my recommendation for this? Well, first I want to talk about what do people want to see. They want buildings that are right next to each other without blanks in between them. They want them to be built right up to the sidewalk. And they want them to be kind of cute and interesting looking. Does anybody know where these pictures are from? Just sort of a side note. Downtown Camas. It's really kind of cute and charming. So that's what people want. So my recommendation related to this idea that you have, it's kind of like putting a wall of ivy in front of your milk display if you're in a store. That's what you guys are doing when you're separating people from the storefront environment and the buildings. So you guys need to start allowing for 100% lot coverage, particularly with small infill projects. Right now, your code requires 15% landscaping. That is not consistent with a storefront commercial environment like the one I just showed you in Camas. And also, your current parking requirements would make it almost impossible. And I would argue even some of the changes don't go far enough. So I would really like to see small infill projects that cover 100% of the lot. Commercial uses need to be built up to the sidewalk. And the last thing is you need to really jazz up the faces that do go to the sidewalk now because they're going to carry the weight for the rest of your district. That is giving the message of what's going on. So let's talk about an example. This is an entry for a restaurant. Okay, this is on 2nd, close to B, in the country square. So it's hard to get Americans to walk upstairs to space or downstairs to space. They only do it in really dense cities. So it's a challenge. It's hard to tell even from this perspective that there's an entry to a restaurant there. What about from this one? Right. So we need to do something to this face. If you put in a window, got rid of all that landscaping and put tables, voila, you would know that that's a restaurant too. And how do we know that's a restaurant? You can't see in the windows, there's no sign. It's the tables. It's how you're interacting from the sidewalk level that gives a message, even if nobody is sitting in those tables. So you really need to work on jazzing up the fronts that go up to the sidewalk. So that covers shelves. Now we're going to move on to your products. This is the last thing that we're going to talk about with the store analogy. The products are your businesses. And so the shelves are our building, the products are our businesses. I have a couple of recommendations related to your ground floor uses. And one of the first ones is tenanting with active ground floor uses wherever possible. And this is for property owners. If you have inward-facing uses or blanks, then it's like having an empty shelf in your store. So tenanting for activity is really important to building long-term value because these tenants actually improve the district and over time increase sales per square foot, which means your property values go up. So tenanting with outward-facing uses. On North Mississippi Avenue, we started out at $12 per square foot. We aggressively tenanted with outward-facing uses. Within 5 years, restaurants were renewing at 24. And it was all because we put the right tenants in on the ground floor. So active ground floor uses are really, really important. Do you know where these pictures are from? Right. From Oswego Village, which is sort of a strip mall, but they've created a really nice walking environment under here, so they get to have an awning. because they've extended their store out to the sidewalk. And this is one of the most attractive places to walk around and look in stores that you have in your entire downtown because it's so engaging from the sidewalk. And it was really kind of a fun, pleasant surprise. So I really want everybody to be thinking that it's everyone's job to tell a story of vibrancy and excitement. And these are the things that people notice in a downtown. They don't notice signs. Buildings, color, contrast, dramatic lighting, outdoor displays, and how do your storefront windows look are the things that really matter. So this is a pedestrian bridge I want to walk on in the middle of the night even though nobody's on it because it looks pretty darn smashing. This store is closed. Looks pretty cool, doesn't it? Do I want to walk by it and go to something that's open next door or a restaurant? Yes, it's contributing to the street front environment even though it's closed. And it's serving as an advertisement for how cool and great the district is. Same with this store. Does anybody know what this is? It's a hotel. It's actually on a very inactive street. They pipe music in the summer. They have comfortable seating. They have a gas fireplace. And they have glass art outside. And in the winter, they maintain that. And it's a really neat space to be out there. So they found a way to create an exciting and engaging street front presence. Grocery stores are usually really natural places to tell a great story on the ground floor. You guys have 3, and we could have some updating going on there. So they're telling a little bit more of a story like this because it's an opportunity lost. Grocery stores can tell a great story from the ground floor. And this is a shopping district at night. Look how engaging this is. I mean, I'm not in the market for a colorful umbrella, but I want to go in this store just because it looks cool. So I want everybody to really be thinking about how do we engage people from the street. The other thing that I want to say that I've really noticed in your downtown a lot in some of your older buildings is a plethora of false ceilings and carpet. And I think we just need to collectively get rid of that for a couple different reasons. Updating building interiors is really, really important. This is the kind of finish that people expect in kind of a cute downtown environment. They want a hard floor surface. They don't want carpet. They want a hard ceiling. They don't want false ceilings. If you want people to buy local and come participate in the local experience, you still have to give them something that is in par with a national level retailer in terms of just environment. So if something looks dated and old, they're not going to feel good about the experience of being in your store, even if your products are really, really great. So I have to say this in a lot of downtowns actually. So get rid of the false ceilings and the carpeting wherever you have them because they are detracting from the experience and the environment that you want to provide in downtown. So that's my quick summary on how to strengthen nodes. The next thing that I want to spend a little bit of time talking about is how to improve connectivity between these nodes. And I'm going to talk about emotional connections and physical connections. Emotional connections are really important. When you go to a strip mall, you don't expect the people at Linens and Things and the people at Ross Dress for Less to know each other or have any relationship whatsoever. That is not what people expect from your downtown. They expect the people from Chuck's and the people at Graham's to kind of know each other, and they expect to come to your downtown and experience the fabric of your community. And that starts with your community downtown. So you have to create a fabric downtown, and people can feel it when it's there. So one of my first recommendations is form a downtown association. I don't like the word business association because it implies that businesses are the only ones who benefit if downtown takes off and does well, and that's not true. You need an organization that has these 4 stakeholder groups involved and engaged. The second thing that you need to do is you need to hire a downtown manager. Nothing gets done unless it's somebody's full-time job to champion downtown, to be its voice, its storyteller, its central point of contact, its marketer, and its chief event planner. These are some recent Facebook posts from the executive director of Downtown Vancouver, Washington's Vancouver Downtown Association. She has been very successful at telling downtown story and has completely changed her community's perception of what's going on in downtown over the last year and a half. My favorite comment up here is that they overheard at the Kiggins Theater, which is a theater they just remodeled downtown, that this building is beautiful, Vancouver is sweetly surprising, and I'm going to come here more often. So the question, who is telling downtown Lake Oswego's story right now? Nobody is. You have great stories. You have 2 James Beard Award-winning chefs who own a restaurant downtown. Who is telling these stories? The second thing is you have to form a connection to your community. And building emotional connection to the community, unfortunately, involves programming, a lot of programming. But that is the easiest way to change hearts and minds, give people positive experience in your downtown. I always remind people that Americans are horrible about leaving their house and just hanging out without a context. So we respond really well to programming, so give it to us. If I had to come up with ideas, you have a lot of, I like to leverage themes. You have salons and accessory stores and clothing stores. There's a ton of events that you could build around fashion or ladies' nights out. You have some great restaurants downtown. One of the things that's too bad, Lakeview Village, best-selling products. You have all these restaurants. Where are they? On the back of the building. So it doesn't bring life and activity to come back up to A. So I would try and think of some restaurant events that might pull people in between these places and start really cementing for people that this is a restaurant district. Downtown Vancouver had one, they called it the Great Mushroom Hunt, and you got a bracelet, and every restaurant had a mushroom appetizer, and you walked to all the restaurants, and you tried the mushroom appetizer, and you voted, and somebody won. So that was a way to start connecting these things up in people's minds and having them walk. You have, obviously, fabulous art downtown. I loved this, by the way. I was thinking that it might be fun. I know you have art walks and an app, but it might be really fun to have something that would catch people's attention in the sidewalk. How many people have seen the dancing steps in Capitol Hill in Seattle? Has anybody seen those? So they're bronze feet that are placed and with numbers, and they show you how to do simple, steps like a waltz, and they're kind of everywhere. They're sort of whimsical. And I was thinking as I was walking around how fun it would be to have some footsteps in your sidewalks that would just spontaneously make you want to explore, and that might lead you in the directions of some different pieces of art that are around town. And so you don't need a paper or an app, just something that might capture your attention. You have a dance studio in a really important corner. Why not take that parking lot and do some outdoor concerts with dance lessons and then dancing afterward during the summer? Again, a way to tie in Lakeview Village and pull people to the north. You have some stores related to paper and bookmaking, and I know they do some lectures and some other things, but continuing to strengthen those ties would be great. The people I see walking around downtown the most are dog walkers. So events for them, outdoor training classes or get-togethers, things like that. Connecting businesses is another thing. I look for opportunities. You have a great toy store with a built-in restaurant. It's a fabulous idea. You could do some parents' night out kind of ideas where maybe a restaurant would have a one-act play or a poetry reading, and child care and activities might be involved here, so you could find ways to combine businesses. I always look for that. Maybe connect through education. People expect downtowns to be centers of kind of learning and culture, so partner with somebody and have a rotating series of lectures that go through different restaurants in town. Might be exciting. So those are ways that I would look for connecting downtown with the community, but there are myriad ways to do that. But that's one of the reasons you want a downtown manager, is to help you do that, because nobody has time to do that and run their business, but they have time to help. So that's emotional connection. We're getting down to the parking now. We're going to talk about physical connection. I feel like I tricked you all and said we're going to talk about parking, and then I haven't talked about parking at all, but I'm going to get into it here. I'm just saving it for last so you can, throw things at me, and I don't have to speak anymore. So downtown environments are places that are connected and walkable without blinks. So you've heard me say that how many times today? And if we return now to the ground floor activation map that I gave you, the black bars that I put on that map, again, are a judgment call, but those are places that I judge stop exploration. So that doesn't mean that they're necessarily a bad environment to walk in, but I try to look at them from the perspective of, if I was a visitor or a shopper and I was just walking around, would I keep going? Would what is there draw me or stop me from continuing to move? So if there's a black line on the map, it means that that's not an environment that's conducive to pedestrians. It's not a place that pulls people to the next spot. And if you look at that map, there's a lot of black there, and it's part of the reason that downtown suffers. This is the reason, is because people don't want to walk past a lot of the areas that you have in your downtown. And some of this is a judgment call and is kind of borderline, but it gives you the gist. And there are several reasons why. You have a lot of inward-facing uses on some of spots. You have large areas with blank walls like Rite Aid and Safeway. And then you have parking blinks. You have a lot of parking blinks. So we talked about how to tackle blank walls and maybe sort of blank buildings and inward-facing uses by looking at what you can do with tenanting for activity. But what do we do with all this? And I want you to sit here and look at these. It's pretty spectacular. So these are just the flat parking lots that you have not on State Street. There are no parking lots on State Street anywhere that are included in this. So we talked about on your ground floor activation map, you have kind of a 6-block area that's commercial. That's a lot of parking lots, and I don't even think I got all of them. And that's probably one of the biggest things that is contributing to your downtown being a place that people don't want to walk. So that's a lot of parking for a small commercial mixed-use district to absorb. Parking is kind of interesting because it's a chicken and egg problem. If you try to create enough parking to meet peak demand that happens 1 or 2 times a year or only on special events, or you try and solve the parking problem in advance and figure out how much parking you're going to need in the future, so let's get it all in place now, what do? You create a place where you have so much parking and you have nothing that interests people and pedestrians. And that's the difficult thing about parking. I want to say that it is never easy to park in a successful mixed-use district. It isn't. And what does that mean? Having a parking problem is a sign that you actually have a really successful mixed-use district. That's the irony of all of this. So the way I look at it is that you guys have one more public parking garage than Northwest 23rd with a fraction of the density. So how do we proceed? So I'm going to dive into parking now. And my big recommendation is and as Jane mentioned, right now you have pretty draconian parking policies and you're making a good faith effort to reduce those. But I'm actually going to say I want them to be reduced even more. I think you should have no commercial parking minimum in your downtown. And I'm going to walk you through why, and I'm going to tell you stories of a couple of places. First of all, under your current parking code, you can't even share parking, which is a huge problem because, as you can see, you've got a mountain of it, and everyone new who comes along actually needs more of it. And you're going to try and mitigate that a little bit, but not all the way. So if you have no commercial parking minimum, it encourages parking sharing, which you should be doing because you have a lot of uses with daytime parking needs, but no nighttime parking needs. Why are we duplicating parking? The second thing is it incentivizes parking space conversion. So instead of this, you wind up with this. Which one is more attractive and contributes to a downtown environment? Obviously, the second one. Now, you couldn't even do that because you have to have parking. No commercial parking minimum encourages small, new infill construction. And I want you guys to start thinking that way. Lakeview Village was very successful. It has a giant parking garage in the middle. I would love for all that space to be devoted to people and have less of it devoted to cars. That's what's going to make downtown successful. You need to attract some smaller infill projects. This is a project that has retail on the ground floor, 2 stories of mixed-use office up above. It finished after the recession started, and it is fully tenanted because it's in a great walking district. There is no off-street parking associated with it. There are buildings on either side, and you couldn't build something like this in downtown Lake Oswego. And you need a lot of this in all those parking lots in downtown Lake Oswego. The other reason I like having no commercial parking minimum is it stimulates redevelopment of your existing buildings and it makes it easy to tenant with outward-facing uses. Here's the funny thing about outward-facing uses, they require more parking. So then you end up with this catch-22 is the more active people that you put in buildings like Bob McGidd's building that is so important, there's no parking down there. So if you want to put in restaurants, all of a sudden you trigger more parking minimums. So it makes it very difficult. This is a building. Obviously, there's no parking. It's constrained on either side by other buildings. If you want a building like this to start contributing to your environment, it's really hard to do it if you have parking minimums because it increases the costs of renovation. And it needs a little bit of work, this building, because it's kind of rough. So if you want this building to contribute and turn into this, which is what it did, no parking minimums are much more likely to encourage this kind of development and these kinds of tenants to come in because it keeps the prices low. So I want to give you two examples of places that are auto-centric and that don't have commercial parking minimums at all. The first one is Gresham. Gresham has had no commercial parking minimum for 15 years, and they have no in lieu of fee. So people can, it's just a straight up no commercial parking minimum. They do require one space per residential unit. They still don't have any on-street meters, and they still have too many parking lots, even after 15 years. But it did allow projects like this to get built, and it allowed projects like this to get built. This is the grocery store that went in downtown, and it's the only grocery store that exists in downtown. These projects probably would not have been built or would have been very difficult to make pencil if there had been a parking minimum. The other story I want to tell you, so I was searching for a place, because everybody tells me, Michele, Lake Oswego, you know, we drive our cars. We're the suburbs. We're not Portland. My answer is always, but you go to Northwest 23rd, so you obviously are willing to sacrifice parking right next to the store you're going to if you have a nice environment to walk around in. So I searched for a story, and I came up with one from the LA area, which is there is no more auto-centric place in the universe than the Los Angeles area. So I'm going to talk about two places. This came out of a book by Donald Shoup called The High Price of Free Parking. It's an amazing book. And it's the story of Old Pasadena and Westwood Village. So Old Pasadena, they're about 20 miles apart. Old Pasadena is filled with old buildings like this. And by the 70s, because there was no room for off-street parking, this area had pretty much become a district that Donald Shoup characterized as home to porn theaters, pawn shops, and tattoo parlors. Everyone from Old Pasadena would drive 20 miles away to Westwood Village for a night out. Nobody stayed in Old Pasadena. Westwood Village has similar infrastructure. They have the same amount of parking, and they have a higher income demographic. So they were pretty puzzled because after the 70s, they ripped down those beautiful buildings that I showed you, and they built an indoor mall that had free interior parking, and it still continued to decline into the 80s and the 90s. And they were really struggling with how do we improve Old Pasadena. And the mayor at the time committed political suicide with this plan, really. He decided to approach revitalization of the historic core by first installing parking meters in an underperforming retail district. Okay? That's pretty unusual, right? But here's the catch, is he took that money generated by the parking meters and he dumped it back into the community. So they took a large bulk of that money from the parking meters and they used it to improve the community and hold events and to make it a better place. And they took a small portion of those revenues and they used it to subsidize a couple of parking garages. So trying to think about the best way to unfold this. If you fast forward to today, Old Pasadena is now the premier walking retail district in the region. And Westwood Village is foundering. And the only difference between these two districts, they have similar infrastructure, they have the same supply of parking. The only difference is their approach to how they manage their parking supply. So I want to talk about that just a little bit. Westwood Village underprices their on-street parking. On-street parking is really important to retailers. You want people to cycle through. You want there to always be a space available so that somebody can get to your store, and you manage that by pricing it appropriately. Westwood Village underprices their on-street parking, so it's always packed with people who are just staying there for too long and not going in and out of the stores. And they have a parking requirement that requires everybody to have massive amounts of off-street parking. So it makes it very hard to renovate these existing old buildings and to put uses into their existing old buildings. In contrast, what Old Pasadena did was they put in the parking meters and appropriately priced the curb parking. If you ask all the retailers there, they all say that the curb parking saved their businesses, the curb meters, not that they hurt their businesses. And they took money to subsidize a garage. And so instead of an in lieu of fee that you have to pay the whole cost of a replacement parking space, they have parking credits. And so they're cheap enough that actually tenants can help pay for them. It's not just landlords. And so people just do, it's a simple monthly fee that they pay into based on various kinds of uses to access the garages. And they need a lot fewer parking spaces because there's a whole mix of people that are using them. And so the irony is, and this was in a recent LA Times LA Magazine article. The people in Westwood Village, what do they all think their parking is? Their problem is, it's parking. They all think that they don't have enough parking, and if they only had more parking, they would all be doing well. Whereas Old Pasadena, which has the same amount of parking, they all think that their parking is fine, and they don't feel like they have not enough parking, and they're doing really, really well, and they've created a very successful pedestrian district there. So what I want to read for you is what the mayor said, who instituted that policy to appropriately price their curb parking. He said, "For 5,000 years, we built cities around people, and they worked well. For 50 years, we've built them around parking lots, a ridiculous use of land, of money, and an intrusion into the intimacy of human scale. Now we've painted ourselves into a corner. The saving grace is that the first 5,000 years might come back again." So I just want you guys to think about in your approach to parking. Imagine if downtown Lake Oswego more strategically and cooperatively used their existing supply of parking so that active businesses could easily go into any building downtown in the core. Imagine if they had no parking minimum and they generated a host of interesting small infill buildings. Imagine if some of these existing small lots in front of buildings could be turned into the types of courtyards that allow seating and living and playing and eating.